Here are some tips for using self-striping yarn on a knitting machine and getting a product where the stripes all align and match up. Some of it depends on the yarn itself. I'm using Hirschner's Fashion yarn. This is a robust number 2 yarn. By robust, I mean the high end of number 2. It knits fine on the standard gauge machine at the very upper range and on the mid gauge machine closer to the middle range of stitch size. I knitted the pictured cardigan at stitch size 12 on the Superba. Swatched the same yarn on the Brother 892, and you see that above. At those settings, the Superba fabric is 6 stitches, 7 rows per inch. The Brother fabric is 6.5 stitches, 8 rows per inch. And I preferred the looser fabric, but both are okay. Every piece of this garment needs to begin in the same spot in the self-striping pattern. So to make things simple, I started with the very beginning of the blue. I have found that this yarn feeds okay from the center of the ball as long as I pull out part of it first to relieve some pressure. So I'm going to dive into the center, since you always need to start either from the inside or the outside, but you have to be consistent. And then I'm pulling out yarn until I get to the blue. And I'll set this other yarn aside. This part isn't wasted exactly, but it can't be part of the project if I'm going to get perfectly matching stripes, which is what I want. It does seem dismaying to have to pull out so much, and you do have to buy extra yarn. Alright, here we are transitioning to the blue. And to make sure that I start right there, I'm going to trim the yarn back here a little bit into the purple, the previous stripe, and knot my yarn so that the very first little bit of blue is the loop that I hang on a needle to start knitting. Alright, let me put that in my hand so you can see. I have my knot placed so that it's right on the join. One side is purple, one side is blue, and the loop itself is blue. And I'll hang that on the rightmost needle. Here's my blue loop. Now if I push the needles forward and set the carriage to knit back from hold, it will start knitting, and I can continue until this skein is nearly out. This is the last little bit of the skein that I've been using. And you see we've been feeding blue, and it's going to go to green and then run out. So I want to join on the next skein right where the green begins. I'm going to go back into the green a little bit and cut it. Now I've got my next skein partly pulled out. I'm going to go up to where the green begins. You can see there are some imperfections. The transition doesn't look quite the same in the two pieces of yarn. So it's a judgment call. I'm going to say the green begins here because you've got to make a decision at some point. So I'm going to go back a little bit into the blue, trim it off, and join the two with a secure knot. I know some grandmas are rolling over in graves, but we've got to get it joined neatly, and on this particular machine I can't change on the fly. So I'm going to knit through the knot, and then I'm going to go back and fix it, but let me make sure it's good and tight. And before I knitted through, I trimmed the ends to about 1 inch long. Now I'm going to knit through. That's the knot. It doesn't knit very nicely, but it did knit, and here's how we'll fix it. Here's the area. Up to here, the stitches are nice and normal. Here they knitted in those yarn tails. So I'm going to unknit that area. till I see both tails free. Now I'm going to manually re-knit those stitches. In this case, only 2 stitches were affected. It can be more, but however many it is, manually knit them in, leaving the yarn tails on the inside. Then later you can finish this however you want. You can just leave it. You can hand stitch it down with a sewing thread. You can pull it, weave it into the back of stitches, whatever seems neatest and most appropriate to you. But in this way, we continue the pattern of the blue stripe transitioning into the green stripe perfectly, or as perfectly as we possibly can. So if you begin every piece in the same exact place in the color repeat and keep the striping continuous, as we've just discussed, you will get matching stripes from a yarn that is made with even dyeing. This one turned out to be very good. That will only work in a pattern designed for this kind of thing, because each piece must have the same number of stitches and cannot have any shaping, say at the neckline and underarm, because that will change the stitch count, which will change the length of the stripes, and I wanted my stripes in this project to be the same width throughout. So here's what we do in that situation. Choose a simple design, such as this kimono-like shape, and cut and sew the neckline. I've made you a video on that too. This pattern will appear in Country Knitting of Maine News and Views Knitting Machine magazine shortly.